Amid the crimson glow of Anomaly 27's observation room, young xenobiologist Iridia Tarek trembled as the containment door emitted a click without anyone touching the controls, because Species H had opened the chamber by itself. All eyes turned toward the slender, pale-skinned figure of the human, who carried no weapons but needed only to smile, before a growling extraterrestrial monster immediately stopped and bowed its head like a pet. What awaited them as they unveiled the secret behind humanity, who turned out to be the mysterious ancestors that created the entire galaxy? In the sterile confines of Epsilon 9 Station, the year 53720 PC, post-cycle, cast long shadows across xenobiologist Iridia Tarek's scaled face. At 28 cycles old, this was her first assignment to the Anomaly Containment Division, a role she had trained for since her adolescent molts. The weight of responsibility pressed against her chest plate as she adjusted her uniform, triple-checking the security protocols on her datapad. Specialist Tarek, report to Central Observation immediately. The station's artificial intelligence announced, its voice unnervingly calm against the backdrop of emergency signals pulsing through the corridor. Anomaly breach detected in Chamber 34H. Containment failure, Priority 1. Tarek's respiratory vents flared as she sprinted down the hallway, her iridian legs carrying her faster than most other species could manage. Chamber 34H housed the human anomaly, the only known specimen of the mythical Species H that had been recovered from a quantum-frozen vessel at the edge of the Orion Spur. For 53,000 cycles, the various evolved species of the galaxy had dismissed humans as mere legend, a failed evolutionary branch, or at best, an extinct ancestor species, until 3 cycles ago, when they found one. As she entered Central Observation, Sergeant Carrix, the station commander, stood rigid before the main display. His weathered iridian exoskeleton showed the pale blue of concern, a color Tarek had rarely seen on the 120-cycle veteran. Specialist, the human has somehow disengaged all security measures in Chamber 34H, Carrix said without turning. It's now moving freely toward the common dining hall. Impossible, Tarek whispered. The chamber's quantum locks require triple authentication from command-level personnel. Security Chief Quintessian Razi, whose metal prosthetic arm gleamed under the emergency lights, grunted in agreement. Exactly. Yet it opened them as easily as you'd open a water dispenser. On the display, Tarek watched as the human specimen, officially designated Human Etalon, but who had asked to be called Morgan, walked calmly down Corridor E, nodding politely to the security drones that hovered nervously around it. Unlike other containment breaches Tarek had studied, there was no violence, no desperate scramble for freedom. The human moved with purpose, but without aggression. This violation of protocol cannot continue, Razi insisted, his organic hand hovering over the emergency containment controls. We should deploy electromagnetic restraints immediately. Carrix's voice dropped to a measured tone that Tarek recognized as his most dangerous. No restraints. Not yet. This is the first mobile interaction we've had with a human specimen. I want to understand what it's doing. Sir, Tarek ventured, the specimen appears to be simply going for a walk. Carrix turned to her, his compound eyes reflecting the red emergency lights. Specialist Tarek, congratulations. You've just been promoted to handler. You will approach the human, make contact, and determine its intentions. Security teams will remain at a distance. Tarek's heart skipped several beats. Sir, Your xenobiology specialization focused on theoretical human behaviors. Did it not? This is now a practical examination. Carrix's tone brooked no argument. Razi will coordinate security. Remember your training. Remain objective. Establish neutral communication. And most importantly, do not allow yourself to be influenced by potential mimetic hazards. As Tarek moved to exit, Razi caught her arm with his metal hand. The containment protocol should have prevented this. Every system failure alarm should be blaring. But instead, nothing. It's as if the station doesn't recognize this as a breach at all. "What are you saying, Chief?" Tarek asked. "I'm saying be careful. Something isn't right. That creature shouldn't be able to walk freely through a facility designed specifically to contain it." The corridor leading to the dining hall stretched before Tarek like an endless throat. Her training replayed in her mind. Humans were considered hypothetically dangerous, not because of physical strength or natural weapons, but because of their supposed ability to adapt to and manipulate any environment. If the old legends were true, they had once spread across thousands of worlds before the time dilation event had wiped most of them out. The dining hall doors slid open, and Tarek stepped through to find Morgan sitting calmly at a table, sipping from a container of synthesized nutrition. The human looked up and smiled, an expression Tarek recognized from her studies but had never witnessed in person. It was unsettlingly friendly. "Hello," Morgan said in perfect universal common. "I was hoping someone would join me. The isolation protocols were becoming a bit restrictive." The human gestured to the seat across the table. "Please, sit down. I promise I don't bite." Tarek approached cautiously, noting that Morgan wore the standard gray containment garment, but somehow made it look like a deliberate fashion choice rather than prison attire. The human's skin was pale, with patches of melanin variation that Tarek recognized as freckles from her studies. Morgan's hair was a startling red-gold color that caught the light, and eyes a deep green that seemed to analyze Tarek just as thoroughly as she was analyzing Morgan. "I'm Specialist Iridia Tarek, Xenobiology Division," she said, remaining standing. "How did you disengage the security systems of Chamber 34H? Morgan's smile widened. "I didn't disengage anything. I simply walked through the door when I wanted to leave." The human paused, head tilting slightly. "Curious, isn't it? A facility built to contain thousands of species. Yet when I approach a door, it opens. Almost as if..." "As if what?" Tarek prompted when Morgan trailed off. "As if it recognizes me." Morgan's eyes sparkled with something Tarek couldn't identify. "Tell me, Specialist Tarek, have you ever wondered why your species calls mine anomaly? Do you know what that word meant in my language?" "It indicates something that deviates from the expected norm," Tarek replied automatically. "A statistical outlier or irregularity." "Yes," Morgan nodded. "But it also implies something that shouldn't be where it is. Something out of place." The human gestured broadly at the station around them. "But what if I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be? And it's the rest of you who don't quite belong?" Before Tarek could respond, Carrick's voice came through her communication implant. "Specialist, return the specimen to Chamber 34H immediately. We're detecting unusual power fluctuations throughout the station." "I have to escort you back to your chamber," Tarek said, trying to project authority she didn't feel. Morgan stood, still smiling. "Of course. I've had my breakfast, after all. But I think you might want to come inside this time. Specialist Tarek, I have something to show you." As they walked back through the corridors, Tarek noticed something odd. The emergency lights had stopped flashing, and more disturbingly, every security drone they passed seemed to adjust its position to allow Morgan clear passage, almost like a gesture of deference. None of them activated their containment protocols, despite the clear breach in progress. When they reached Chamber 34H, the door slid open without Tarek inputting any codes. Inside, instead of the sterile containment cell she expected, Tarek found herself looking at what appeared to be a small, living space, with items she recognized from historical archives, physical books with paper pages, a device that appeared to be for brewing a stimulant beverage called coffee, and various other artifacts of human civilization. "Welcome to my humble abode," Morgan said, gesturing for Tarek to enter. "Don't worry, the surveillance systems are still active. Your superiors can see and hear everything. I wouldn't want them to think I'm trying to subvert their prize xenobiologist." Tarek stepped inside, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "How did you acquire these items? Our scans indicated you arrived with nothing but the stasis suit." "I requested them," Morgan replied simply. "And the station provided—" "That's impossible. This facility doesn't provide comforts to containment subjects." Morgan picked up one of the books, a bound collection of paper sheets with ink markings that Tarek recognized as an inefficient but historically significant information storage method. "This is a first edition of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells," Morgan said, caressing the cover. "Published in 1895 CE, Earth Calendar. A story about a man who travels far into the future and finds humanity split into two species. One living in light, one in darkness." The human looked up at Tarek. "Prescient, wouldn't you say? Our records indicate Earth literature was lost during the time dilation event," Tarek said, unable to hide her fascination. "These should not exist. And yet, here they are." Morgan set the book down carefully. "Just as I am here, despite your records suggesting my kind should not exist. Perhaps your records are incomplete." Specialist Tarek. From her communication implant, Tarek could hear Carrick's ordering her to investigate further, to determine how the human had acquired these artifacts. But there was something else in his voice, a hint of the same fascination she felt. "I'd like to run some tests," Tarek said, her professional demeanor returning. "To understand how you're interacting with station systems." "Of course," Morgan agreed readily. "But first, would you like some coffee? Real coffee, not that synthetic stimulant your people drink." Against her better judgment, Tarek agreed. As Morgan prepared the beverage using a device the human called an AeroPress, Tarek observed carefully. There was nothing particularly special about Morgan's movements or appearance that would explain the station's unusual response. "Here you go," Morgan said, offering a small cup. "Careful, it's hot." Tarek took the cup, her sensors indicating the liquid was indeed at a temperature that would require caution. She sipped it carefully and was immediately struck by a complex flavor profile that her taste receptors struggled to categorize. "This is remarkable," she admitted. "One of humanity's greatest achievements," Morgan said with a wink. "Now, about those tests. What would you like to know?" Over the next several hours, Tarek conducted a series of increasingly complex assessments. She scanned Morgan's biometrics, tested response times to various stimuli, and even attempted to determine if the human was emitting any unusual electromagnetic signals that might explain the station's behavior. Nothing. By all measurable standards, Morgan was simply a biological organism, unusual in structure compared to current galactic species, but nothing that should command special treatment from advanced technology. "Perhaps we should try something more practical," Morgan suggested, after the latest inconclusive test. "You have a climate control malfunction in section E15, don't you? The one your engineering team has been struggling with for the past 2 cycles?" Tarek frowned. "How could you possibly know that?" "The station tells me things," Morgan said with a shrug. "May I?" Before Tarek could object, Morgan walked to the chamber's environmental control panel, a system that should have been isolated from the station's main functions, and began interfacing with it. Tarek watched in astonishment as the human's fingers danced across the controls with practiced ease, bringing up system diagnostics that even senior engineers struggled to access. "There's your problem," Morgan said, pointing to a cascading series of code sequences. "Someone input a recursive diagnostic loop about 30,000 cycles ago. It's been compounding ever since, creating tiny errors that eventually manifested as temperature fluctuations. With a few quick adjustments, Morgan corrected the issue, and the panel displayed a confirmation message indicating the problem had been resolved. That shouldn't be possible, Tarek stammered. That system is 30,000 cycles old. The language protocols should be completely foreign to you. Morgan turned to face her, expression suddenly serious. Nothing on this station is foreign to me. Specialist Tarek. That's what I've been trying to tell you. A chime from the door interrupted them. It slid open to reveal Ishan, a younger technician from the genetics lab. His eyes widened at the sight of Morgan standing freely near the control panel. Specialist Tarek, he said nervously. Sergeant Carrick's request your presence in the genetics lab immediately. There's been a discovery. Tarek glanced at Morgan, who smiled encouragingly. Go ahead. I'll be here when you return. Perhaps with more books to show you. In the genetics lab, Tarek found Carrick's standing over a holographic display, with Ishan and several other specialists. The commander's exoskeleton had shifted to a deep purple, the iridian color of profound concern. Specialist, Carrick's acknowledged her without looking up. Technician Ishan has made a rather alarming discovery regarding our human specimen. Ishan, a human clone engineered from recovered genetic material decades ago, but lacking the inexplicable qualities of Morgan, nervously adjusted the display. We've been analyzing the DNA samples collected during initial containment. The results are, well, see for yourself. The display showed a complex genetic comparison model, with Morgan's DNA sequence highlighted against reference samples from various species across the galaxy. These markers here, Ishan pointed to specific sequences, appear in Iridian DNA, these ones in Quintessian, these in Quans. His finger moved across the display, highlighting dozens of matches across nearly every known sentient species. The statistical probability of this occurring naturally is effectively zero. What are you suggesting? Tarek asked, though she already felt a chill of understanding. Carrick's finally looked up, his compound eyes reflecting the genetic display. Either every species in the galaxy independently evolved identical genetic markers, impossible, or Morgan's species is the source, Tarek finished. Humans aren't just another evolved species. They're progenitors. There's more, Ishan added nervously. The station's E-Core AI has granted the human specimen user level 5 access permissions. That's the highest possible level, reserved for the station's original founders. Tarek's mind raced with implications. That would explain why the door's open, why the security systems don't register a breach. It doesn't explain how a supposedly primitive species from a backwater planet could have founded a station that, according to our records, predates their civilization by thousands of cycles, Carrick's countered. Unless our records are wrong, Tarek said quietly. Morgan suggested as much. A new voice cut through their discussion, harsh and accusatory. Or unless the specimen has somehow hacked our systems and is manipulating both technology and personnel. Tarek turned to see Supervision Specialist Tavel entering the lab. His Quintessian features set in rigid disapproval. Unlike Razi's pragmatic caution, Tavel was known for his hardline approach to containment and his particular distrust of anomalies that displayed intelligence. Specialist Tavel, Carrick's acknowledged coldly. I don't recall requesting your presence. When containment protocols are violated so egregiously, my presence becomes mandatory, Tavel replied. I've reviewed the surveillance footage. Specialist Tarek has been completely compromised by the human's influence. That's absurd, Tarek protested. I've maintained professional objectivity throughout. You drank an unknown substance it provided, Tavel cut her off. You allowed it access to station systems. You've been experiencing what the historical records call mimetic influence, a documented human ability to subvert rational thought through social manipulation. Carrick's exoskeleton rippled with irritation. Specialist Tavel, your concerns are noted. However, the evidence suggests we're dealing with something far more significant than a simple containment issue. If humans truly are the progenitor species, then they represent the greatest threat to our evolutionary independence. Tavel interrupted again. I'm implementing Emergency Protocol Theta 9, complete isolation of the specimen and decontamination of all personnel who have had contact. You don't have the authority, Carrick's growled. With respect, Sergeant. I do. Tavel produced an authorization code that pulsed on his personal device. Direct from Central Command. The human is to be placed in maximum isolation immediately, and Specialist Tarek is relieved of duty pending psychological evaluation. Tarek felt her world narrowing. Everything she'd learned, everything Morgan had shown her, buried again under paranoia and protocol. But something didn't add up. If Morgan wanted to manipulate us, she argued, why reveal these connections at all? Why not simply escape? The specimen has demonstrated the ability to leave at any time. That's precisely what makes it so dangerous, Tavel replied. It's not trying to escape. It's trying to infiltrate. As security personnel entered to escort Tarek to the medical bay for evaluation, she caught Carrick's eye. The commander's expression was unreadable, but he gave her the slightest nod, a signal she recognized from her training. Play along. Observe. Report. Over the next cycle, Tarek endured a battery of psychological assessments, each designed to detect signs of external influence or cognitive manipulation. She answered truthfully about everything she had observed, careful to frame her experiences in the clinical language of xenobiology rather than the wonder she truly felt. Meanwhile, she learned through Ishan, who visited under the guise of collecting neural scans, that Morgan had been placed in a new containment chamber with enhanced isolation protocols. Yet, strangely, the human had offered no resistance, maintaining the same pleasant demeanor even as security personnel had arrived to transport the specimen. The strangest thing, Ishan whispered as he adjusted the scanning equipment, is that the new chamber systems are behaving just like the old one. Doors opening on approach, environmental controls adjusting to human preferences. Tavel is beside himself with frustration. Has anyone checked the original chamber? Tarek asked quietly. The books, the coffee maker. Where did they come from? Ishan's eyes widened slightly. Actually, no. After Morgan was moved, the chamber was sealed pending decontamination. No one's been inside. That night, unable to sleep in the medical observation room, Tarek made a decision. Her security clearance had been restricted, but her medical status granted her limited movement rights within certain sections of the station, including, conveniently, the corridor where Chamber 34H was located. The station's night cycle had reduced lighting and minimal staff presence. Tarek moved carefully, using her knowledge of patrol patterns to avoid the few security drones still active. When she reached Chamber 34H, she hesitated. The door was sealed with Tavel's security protocols, far beyond her current access level. Yet something compelled her to reach for the control panel anyway. As her fingers hovered over the interface, the panel lit up with recognition, and the door slid open silently. Inside, the chamber appeared exactly as she'd left it. The books, the coffee maker, the hints of Earth culture that shouldn't exist. Tarek moved quickly to the environmental control panel Morgan had accessed earlier. If the human had indeed manipulated station systems, perhaps there would be evidence here. The panel activated at her touch, displaying not the standard interface, but a much more complex system architecture than she'd ever seen before. Symbols and code structures scrolled past, a language both alien and strangely familiar. Curious, isn't it? Morgan's voice came from behind her. Tarek spun around, heart racing, to find nothing. The chamber was empty. Over here, the voice came again, and a small holographic projection appeared above what looked like an antique wristwatch on the table. Morgan's face, miniaturized but perfectly detailed, smiled up at her. How? Tarek began. Quantum entanglement communicator, the hologram explained. A simple device, by the standards of those who built this station. I left it for you because I suspected Tavel might intervene. You knew he would isolate you. It was statistically probable. Fear is a consistent reaction across all evolved species when confronted with their origins. The holographic Morgan looked sad briefly. I had hoped for more curiosity than fear, but old habits, I suppose. Where did all these items come from? Tarek asked, gesturing to the books and other artifacts. They couldn't have been fabricated without records in the station's database. They weren't fabricated. They were stored. The hologram flickered slightly. This station has many secrets, Specialist Tarek, including a sealed archive section that hasn't been accessed in over 50,000 cycles. That's impossible. The station's blueprints are incomplete. Morgan finished for her. Deliberately so. Tell me, have you ever wondered why your people call this place Epsilon 9? What happened to Epsilons 1 through 8? Tarek had no answer for that. She'd never questioned the station's designation. I need your help. Tarek, the hologram continued. Tavel's isolation protocols won't hold me any more than the previous containment did. But his fear is dangerous. He's planning something that could endanger everyone on this station, including the other anomalies in containment. How could you possibly know that? The holographic Morgan smiled sadly. The same way I know how to access every system on this station. The same way I know about the climate control malfunction before anyone told me. I'm connected to this place in ways your people have forgotten. Tarek found herself believing the human, despite everything her training told her about maintaining skepticism. What do you need me to do? Come find me. Not in the new containment chamber. Tavel will be watching that too closely. There's another way. The hologram gestured, and the environmental panel behind Tarek changed to display a station schematic she'd never seen before. These maintenance tunnels haven't been used in millennia, but they're still functional. They'll lead you to Section Alpha, a part of the station that doesn't appear in your current records. And then what? Then I'll show you the truth. About this station. About humanity. About why I'm here. The hologram flickered again. But hurry. I fear Tavel won't wait long before taking more drastic action. As if on cue, the station's alert system activated. A soft, preliminary tone that indicated non-emergency staff communication. Attention all personnel, Tavel's voice announced. Effective immediately. New security protocols are being implemented station-wide. All staff are to report to their supervisors for updated clearance assignments. This is a precautionary measure only. The hologram of Morgan looked concerned. It's starting. He's restricting access, compartmentalizing the staff. Soon he'll have enough control to implement whatever he's planning. Which is what exactly? Tarek asked. I don't know the specifics, the hologram admitted. But his psychological profile suggests extreme measures when faced with perceived threats to established order. The maintenance tunnels? Tarek, find me there. The hologram disappeared, leaving Tarek alone with a decision that could end her career. Or worse, if Tavel's paranoia was justified. Yet the evidence she'd seen, the genetic markers, the station's response to Morgan, all pointed to something profound that transcended standard containment protocols. She memorized the schematics on the display, then carefully exited Chamber 34H, ensuring the door sealed behind her. As she moved through the corridors, back toward the medical bay, she noticed security personnel were already more numerous, checking identification chips and restricting movement between sections. The next day passed in tense anticipation. Tarek completed her final psychological evaluation, receiving clearance to return to limited duty, though Tavel had ensured she was assigned to data analysis, far from any containment areas. She used the opportunity to discreetly research the station's historical records, looking for any mention of Section Alpha or previous Epsilon stations. The official archives were frustratingly incomplete. Epsilon 9 station was listed as having been established 15,000 cycles ago by the early Galactic Alliance, a precursor to the current evolutionary union. No mention of Epsilon's 1A8, no reference to Section Alpha, and certainly nothing suggesting human involvement in its founding. Yet, there were inconsistencies. Technical specifications referenced systems that didn't appear in the engineering schematics. Maintenance logs showed repairs to sections that supposedly didn't exist. And most intriguingly, the station's AI core, the E-core that had granted Morgan highest-level access, was of unknown origin, its programming language unlike any developed by current galactic species. As her shift ended, Tarek made her decision. Using her restored but limited access privileges, she made her way to a maintenance junction near the station's central core. According to the schematics Morgan had shown her, an unmarked access panel here should lead to the forgotten tunnels. The panel was there, just as promised, disguised as an ordinary section of wall. When Tarek pressed her hand against it, nothing happened. She frowned, remembering how doors simply opened for Morgan. Perhaps these older systems required different authentication. On a hunch, she pulled out the small specimen collection device she always carried, standard equipment for a xenobiologist. She had used it to take a skin cell sample from Morgan during their tests. Carefully, she pressed the preserved sample against the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hiss that hadn't been heard in millennia, the panel receded, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Tarek glanced around to ensure she wasn't observed, then slipped inside. The panel closed behind her, leaving her in darkness until soft blue illumination gradually grew from strips along the floor and ceiling. The air was stale but breathable, recycled by systems that had apparently continued functioning without maintenance for thousands of cycles. The passage stretched before her, curving gently downward toward the station's core. Tarek moved carefully, aware that these tunnels didn't appear on any current maintenance schedule and wouldn't be patrolled if something went wrong. After what felt like hours of navigating increasingly ancient corridors, Tarek reached a massive sealed door, unlike anything she'd seen on the station. Its surface was inscribed with symbols, similar to those she'd seen on the environmental panel in Morgan's chamber, not quite matching any known language, yet somehow readable if she didn't try to translate specific words, but instead absorbed the patterns. "Warning," she murmured, running her fingers over the symbols. "Authorized. No. Authenticated. Personnel only. Beyond this point lies..." The last symbol eluded her, but the door was responding to her touch. Ancient mechanisms whirring to life. Slowly, ponderously. It began to slide open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Tarek stepped through into what appeared to be a control center, but on a scale that dwarfed anything in the known station. Holographic displays hung in the air, most dormant, but a few flickering with activity. In the center stood a figure, Morgan, but dressed differently now, in a form-fitting suit with glowing interface points that connected to the systems around them. "You made it," Morgan said, turning to greet her. "I was beginning to worry." "What is this place?" Tarek asked, her voice hushed with awe. "This," Morgan gestured around them, "is the true heart of Epsilon 9, the command center from which the original mission was coordinated." "What mission?" Instead of answering directly, Morgan touched one of the interface points on the suit, and the dormant holographic displays flared to life. They showed star maps, genetic sequences, planetary formations, a stunning array of scientific data flowing in patterns that made Tarek's head spin. "It was called Project Elder," Morgan explained. "Begun on Earth approximately 55,000 of your cycles ago, when humanity first achieved interstellar travel and genetic engineering sophisticated enough for our purpose." "Which was?" "Seeding," Morgan said simply. "We were dying. Tarek, Earth was becoming uninhabitable due to our own short-sightedness. Our species faced extinction, but we had the technology to ensure our genetic legacy would continue. The displays shifted to show spacecraft, thousands of them, departing a blue-green world that Tarek recognized from historical archives as Earth. Project Elder sent ships to hundreds of thousands of worlds with compatible biospheres. Morgan continued. Each carried genetic material and specialized AIs programmed to oversee controlled evolution. The goal was to create diverse but related species adapted to their environments, all sharing core human genetic sequences. Tarek felt dizzy with the implications. You're saying all sentient species in the galaxy are human descendants? Yes, Morgan nodded. Modified for different environments, evolved over thousands of generations, but all carrying the fundamental genetic signature of humanity. That's why your station's systems recognize me. They were built by humans, for humans, programmed to serve human genetic signatures. And all of you carry those signatures, albeit in modified form. But our histories, our evolutionary records, were lost or deliberately obscured during the time dilation event, Morgan said. When the catastrophe occurred, it fractured space-time throughout this sector of the galaxy. Most human supervisory teams were lost. The evolved species, your ancestors, were left to develop independently, their origins forgotten. Morgan touched another interface point, and a new hologram appeared, a formal recording of a human figure in similar attire. Hologram Scribe V23, the figure announced. Final status report before emergency protocols. The time dilation event has compromised 97% of Elder Project oversight. Continuity of mission endangered. Implementing Directive Omega. Preservation of core genetic material and technological foundations for future recovery. All remaining supervisory personnel are to enter stasis until recovery becomes viable. May our children's children find their way back to us. The recording ended, leaving Tarek and Morgan in silence, broken only by the soft hum of ancient systems. I was part of the oversight team for the Orion Spur, Morgan said quietly. When the time dilation event occurred, my ship was caught in a temporal eddy. What was seconds for me was 50,000 cycles for the galaxy. When I emerged and found my way here, I discovered a station built by my people, now operated by our descendants who had forgotten us entirely. And classified you as an anomaly, Tarek added, the irony not lost on her. Indeed, the ultimate case of mistaken identity. Morgan smiled sadly. I could have simply left, used my genetic access to commandeer a ship. But when I realized what had happened, that the project's evolutionary lines had succeeded beyond our wildest hopes. But the planned reunification had never occurred. I knew I needed to understand this new galaxy before revealing the truth. A sudden alarm blared through the chamber, red lights pulsing in warning. What's happening? Tarek asked, startled. Morgan rushed to another console. It's Tavel. He's... The human's expression hardened. He's initiated a complete security shutdown. All containment fields are being deactivated. That's insane. There are dozens of dangerous anomalies in containment. If they're all released simultaneously... Exactly, Morgan said grimly. He's creating a crisis that will justify extreme measures, likely planning to evacuate key personnel and implement purge protocols. He'd sacrifice the station. Why? Because in his mind, the threat I represent is greater than any physical danger. Morgan's fingers flew across the ancient interface. He doesn't realize I'm not the only human on this station. You all are, in the ways that matter most. We need to stop him before... The station shuddered violently, and new alarms joined the first. Containment breach detected in Sectors C through G. The station's AI announced. All personnel implement emergency protocols. This is not a drill. Morgan grabbed Tarek's arm. We need to move. Now. If we can reach the main AI core, I can override Tavel's commands and restore containment. That's halfway across the station, Tarek protested. And with containment breaches. I know another way, Morgan assured her. These maintenance tunnels connect to every critical system. But we need to hurry. They raced through the ancient corridors, guided by Morgan's seemingly instinctive knowledge of the station's true layout. Twice, they had to stop and hide, as something massive moved in connecting tunnels, escaped anomalies finding their way into the forgotten passages. Almost there, Morgan panted as they approached another sealed door. This will put us directly adjacent to the AI core chamber. The door opened to reveal a narrow observation gallery, overlooking the massive chamber that housed the station's intelligence. Below them, Tarek could see Tavel and several security personnel working frantically at control stations, while status displays showed chaos unfolding throughout the station. Don't care about the secondary containment failures, Tavel was saying. Lock down the evacuation shuttles for authorized personnel only. Once we're clear, implement Protocol Omega Black. One of the technicians looked up in alarm. Sir, Omega Black will destroy the entire station. There are over 3,000 personnel still on board, and millions more throughout the sector who will be at risk if these anomalies escape, particularly the human. Tavel retorted, The decision has been made at the highest levels. Now complete the preparations. Morgan turned to Tarek, expression grim. I need to get down there and access the primary interface, but they've got the chamber secured. What happens if you can't stop this? More than just the station will be lost, Morgan said. The AI core contains the only complete records of Project Elder, the genetic keys to all evolved species, the true history of the galaxy. If it's destroyed, the human left the implications hanging. A tremendous crash echoed from somewhere nearby, followed by the sounds of tearing metal and security alarms. What was that? Tarek whispered. Morgan's eyes widened. Draconis Devastor. Tavel must have released it from high-security containment. At Tarek's confused look, Morgan explained. It's what you would call a Class 5 predator anomaly, essentially unkillable with conventional weapons, and historically used to hunt, well, humans. Ironically enough, though that knowledge has been lost. As if summoned by the description, a massive shape burst through the wall of the observation gallery, a creature of nightmare. All teeth and armored scales and sensory appendages evolved specifically for tracking prey. It roared, a sound that seemed to shake the very structure of the station, as it fixed compound eyes on the two figures before it. Razi appeared in the new opening, his prosthetic arm reconfigured into a weapon. Specialist Tarek, get down, he shouted, opening fire on the Draconis. The security chief's weapon barely scored the creature's hide. It turned, annoyed rather than injured, and prepared to charge. Stop! Morgan stepped forward, hands raised, and made a strange whistling sound. Wah, wah. Unlike anything Tarek had heard before. To her astonishment, the Draconis froze. Its aggressive posture relaxed, and it tilted its massive head, sensory appendages quivering with what almost seemed like recognition. Good, Morgan said soothingly, approaching the creature with careful steps. You remember, don't you? Deep in your genetic memory, you were engineered by us, to protect us, not to hunt. The Draconis made a rumbling sound, then slowly lowered its armored head. Morgan reached out and placed a hand on its snout, and the creature, which had killed dozens of security personnel in previous containment breaches, submitted like a domesticated pet. Razi stared in disbelief. That's impossible. No more impossible than a human walking through secure doors, Tarek said, understanding dawning. The Draconis was created by humans, wasn't it, Morgan? Like so much else on this station. Morgan nodded, still soothing the massive predator. It was a security measure, one of many designed to protect Project Elder facilities. Its aggression toward station personnel is a programming error. It doesn't recognize your genetic signatures as authorized because they've diverged too far from baseline human. But it recognizes you, Razi said, lowering his weapon slightly. Yes. And now that it's been reminded of its true purpose. Morgan looked at the Draconis thoughtfully. I think it might help us reach the AI core. Below, in the core chamber. Tavel's voice rose in triumph. Final authorization received. Omega Black Protocol initiating in 3 minutes. Begin evacuation procedures for essential personnel only. Morgan turned to Tarek and Razi, determination in every line of the human's face. I have a plan, but I need both of you to trust me, completely. What followed was perhaps the strangest alliance in the station's long history. With the Draconis Devastator leading the way, smashing through barriers that would have taken hours to bypass, Morgan, Tarek, and a reluctantly cooperative Razi made their way to a service entrance to the AI core chamber. Once we're inside, Morgan explained hurriedly, I need to reach the central interface pillar. From there, I can assert primary administrative control. Tarek, you'll need to run interference with the technical staff. Keep them distracted. Razi, you handle Tavel. Don't hurt him, just contain him. And the Draconis? Razi asked nervously. Morgan patted the creature's armored flank. He'll make sure no one interferes too aggressively. With a final nod to each other, they burst into the chamber. The Draconis roared, causing technicians to scatter in panic. Razi moved with military precision toward Tavel, while Tarek positioned herself between the fleeing technical staff and the emergency controls. Morgan sprinted for the central interface pillar, a crystalline structure that rose from floor to ceiling, pulsing with the intelligence that governed the station. As security drones converged, the human made a sweeping gesture. Override, Administrative Authority Morgan Chen, Project Elder Oversight. To everyone's astonishment, the drones immediately powered down, dropping to the floor like deactivated toys. No, Tavel shouted, breaking away from Razi's grasp. You don't understand what you're doing. It's controlling you all. Morgan reached the pillar and placed both hands on its surface. Light flowed from the crystalline structure up the human's arms, creating patterns that matched the interface points on the suit. The chamber's displays flickered, then stabilized with new information. The true schematics of Epsilon 9, the complete records of Project Elder, and a rapidly counting down timer for Protocol Omega Black. E-Core, Morgan commanded, voice resonating with authority. Recognize primary genetic signature. Authenticate. Human baseline alpha. The AI's voice changed, becoming somehow both more mechanical and more alive. Authentication confirmed. Welcome, Overseer. It has been 53,691 cycles since last direct interface. Emergency protocol override, Morgan continued. Cancel Omega Black. Restore all containment systems. Initiate recovery sequence Elder Prime. Acknowledged. The AI responded. Omega Black cancelled. Containment restoration in progress. Elder Prime sequence initiated. Warning. Significant genetic drift detected in evolved species. Recalibration required for full implementation. The countdown disappeared from the displays, replaced by status indicators, showing containment fields reactivating throughout the station. The escaped anomalies, most of which, Tarek now realized, were probably other forgotten creations of Project Elder, were being automatically rounded up by suddenly reactivated security systems. Tavel, seeing his plan unraveling, made a desperate lunge toward an emergency terminal. You can't let it take control. The human will subjugate us all. Razi intercepted him, the security chief's prosthetic arm locking around Tavel's midsection. Enough! Look around you! Tavel! If Morgan wanted to harm us, we'd already be dead. Indeed. The human still stood connected to the AI core, but rather than issuing commands for destruction, Morgan was systematically restoring order to the station, repairing damaged systems, guiding escaped anomalies back to their containment areas. even deploying medical drones to injured personnel. Finally, as the crisis subsided, Morgan stepped back from the pillar, looking exhausted but satisfied. It's done. The station is secure. Sergeant Carrick's arrived with a security team, surveying the scene with his compound eyes, taking in every detail. The subdued Tavel, the docile Draconis, and Morgan, standing calmly beside the AI core. "Someone," Carrick said with remarkable composure, "had better explain exactly what has happened here." And so they did. Over the next several hours, as the station returned to normal operations, Morgan revealed the truth about Project Elder, about humanity's role as the progenitor species, about the time dilation event that had fractured the oversight mission and left the evolved species to develop independently, their origins forgotten. The E-Core AI, now fully reactivated with its original programming accessible, provided historical records and genetic analyses that confirmed everything Morgan claimed. DNA comparisons showed conclusively that every sentient species in the known galaxy carried human genetic markers, modified and evolved for different environments, but fundamentally connected. The station wasn't built to contain anomalies, Morgan explained to the assembled senior staff. It was designed as a monitoring hub for Project Elder, one of 9 such facilities throughout the galaxy. When the time dilation event occurred, and most of the oversight teams were lost, the surviving evolved species repurposed these stations according to their understanding, but without knowledge of their true function. "And the anomalies we've been containing?" Carrick asked. "Many are other forgotten creations from the project, specialized organisms or technologies designed for specific purposes. Others are truly unknown phenomena that emerged during the 50,000 cycles of independent evolution. Your containment protocols weren't entirely misguided, just incomplete in their understanding." Tavel, now restrained and facing serious charges for endangering the station, glared at Morgan. "So now the truth comes out. You'll reclaim control, subjugate us as failed experiments." Morgan looked at him with something like pity. "That was never the intention of Project Elder. We didn't create your ancestors to rule them, but to ensure humanity's legacy would continue in some form. The planned reunification was meant to be a sharing of knowledge, not a reassertion of control." "Then what happens now?" Tarek asked. The question everyone was thinking. Morgan smiled, the same friendly expression that had first struck Tarek as unsettling, but now seemed reassuring. "That's not for me alone to decide. I may be the only surviving member of the original oversight team, but this galaxy belongs to all of you now. I'm simply a connection to your shared past." In the cycles that followed, Epsilon 9 underwent a profound transformation. Under Carrick's leadership, and with Morgan's guidance, the facility was reclassified from an anomaly containment division to the Heritage Research Institute, a center for studying the true history of galactic civilization and the connections between evolved species. Tarek was promoted to Descendant Liaison Officer, a newly created position responsible for facilitating communication between Morgan and the various species represented on the station. Her xenobiology expertise, combined with her first-hand experience of the revelations, made her uniquely qualified for the role. The news of humanity's status as the progenitor species spread gradually throughout the evolutionary union, causing initial shock and disbelief, then intense scientific and philosophical debate. Some, like Tavel, feared the implications and resisted accepting the evidence. Others embraced the connection, seeing it as an opportunity to understand their origins and perhaps reclaim lost knowledge. For Morgan, the path forward was complex. As the sole representative of original humanity, the human faced both reverence and suspicion, curiosity and fear. There was pressure from some quarters to immediately implement a full reunification protocol, as originally planned in Project Elder. essentially attempting to revert evolved species closer to the human baseline. Morgan steadfastly refused. The beauty of evolution is its adaptation to circumstance, the human explained during a Union Council meeting. Your species have developed remarkable traits and cultures unique to your environments and experiences. Forcing a return to human baseline would be a tragic loss of that diversity. The very diversity Project Elder was designed to encourage. Instead, Morgan proposed a more measured approach, sharing the technological and historical knowledge preserved in the Elder archives, while respecting the independent development of evolved species. The human emphasized that being the progenitor species granted humanity no special authority, only a responsibility to help their descendants understand their shared heritage. One evening, as Epsilon 9 entered its night cycle, Tarek found Morgan in what had once been Chamber 34H, but was now the human's permanent quarters. Morgan stood before a small stone sculpture, a representation of ancient Earth that had been discovered in the station's archives. "Reflective mood?" Tarek asked, noticing the human's pensive expression. Morgan nodded. "I was thinking about what it means to be the last original human, at least, everyone I knew, everyone I loved. 50,000 cycles gone." "But not without legacy," Tarek pointed out. "You seeded the galaxy with your descendants. We're all carrying a piece of humanity forward." "Yes," Morgan smiled, touching the sculpture gently. "And perhaps that's enough. Not to rule, but to serve. Not to command, but to connect." In the observation dome above them, the stars of the Orion Spur glittered, each potentially home to worlds where Project Elder had taken root, where human genes had evolved into new forms, new species, new civilizations. The true diversity of humanity's legacy stretched across the galaxy, not as a single dominant species, but as a tapestry of evolved descendants, each unique, yet fundamentally connected. "What will you do now?" Tarek asked. Morgan looked up at the stars thoughtfully. "Learn. There's 50,000 cycles of history I've missed, species I never imagined possible, cultures and technologies that evolved in ways we could never have predicted." The human turned to Tarek with that now familiar smile. "And, perhaps, in time, find a way to complete the original mission, not as reunification or reversion, but as recognition. A galaxy where all species understand their shared origins without sacrificing their unique identities." "Is that possible?" Tarek wondered. "If there's one thing I've learned about human genes," Morgan said, "it's their remarkable adaptability. And if that quality has been passed to all of you, our children's children across 1,000 worlds, then yes, I believe it's not just possible. It's inevitable." Throughout the station, systems hummed with renewed purpose, ancient technologies reawakening to serve their intended function after 50,000 cycles of misunderstanding. The E-Core AI, now fully restored, began the meticulous process of reconnecting with other Elder facilities scattered across the galaxy, piecing together the fractured network that had once overseen humanity's most ambitious project. And in the common dining hall, species that had once seen each other as evolutionary competitors now shared meals and stories, beginning to glimpse the connections that had always existed beneath their differences. A Quintessian security officer nervously accepted a cup of real coffee from an Iridian scientist, while a domesticated Draconis curled up contentedly in a corner. No longer an anomaly to be feared, but a living artifact of their shared heritage. The reunion of humanity with its descendants had begun, not as the creators had originally envisioned, but perhaps in a way that honored both the legacy of the past and the diversity of the present. A new chapter in galactic history was being written, with Epsilon 9 at its center and Morgan, the last original human, as its unlikely author. In her personal log that night, Tarek recorded her thoughts for posterity. Today marks one full cycle since the revelation that changed everything. The barriers between us and anomaly have dissolved, replaced by a more profound understanding of our shared origins. Morgan insists that humanity never intended to reclaim authority over their descendants, but rather to share knowledge and connection. I find myself believing this, not because of any genetic predisposition or mimetic influence, but because I've seen firsthand how Morgan uses power, not to control, but to protect, not to dominate, but to illuminate. Perhaps this is the most important legacy humanity passed to us all, not just their genes, but their capacity for both tremendous creation and profound connection. As debates continued throughout the evolutionary union about the implications of their newly discovered origins, as scientific teams began carefully exploring the reactivated elder archives, as diplomatic envoys from 100 species arrived at Epsilon 9 seeking audience with the last human, a quiet transformation was already underway. Species that had evolved in isolation were rediscovering their connection, not to subjugate or be subjugated, but to recognize in each other the shared spark that had spread across the stars 50,000 cycles ago. And in the heart of Epsilon 9, where ancient systems pulsed with renewed purpose, Morgan stood at the center of it all, the anomaly that was never truly anomalous, the outsider who was actually the ultimate insider, the last of the first who had become the first of what might be a new beginning. The galaxy's greatest mystery had been solved, only to reveal a greater one, not who they had been, but who they might become together.